Well, hello everyone. Thank you guys for coming. We've had such a good time researching everything we talk about, and it's really great that we can kind of geek out about it with you. So thank you so much. So this presentation is going to be about my research of Erasmus Darwin's methods of female education that he advocated for in his treatise, A Plan for the Conduct of Female Education in Boarding Schools, Private Families, and Public Seminaries. And that was published in 1797. He fathered two illegitimate daughters by his family governess, Mary Parker. The daughters, Susanna and Mary Parker, would be provided a school, which would be an all-girls boarding school, wherein Darwin's educational theories and the sisters' educational experience would create a space to exercise as educational, medical, and disciplinary theories. In Darwin's treatise, he argues that the proper education of girls consists in, quote, uniting health and agility of body with cheerfulness and activity of mind, in adding graceful movements to the former and agreeable taste to the latter, and in the acquirement of the rudiments of such arts and sciences as may amuse ourselves or gain the esteem of others with a strict attention to the culture of morality and religion, unquote. My project has consisted of discovering information about the lives and education of Erasmus Darwin, Susanna Parker, and Mary Parker, historical information about Miss Parker's school, analysis of the curriculum, discussion of Darwin's educational theories, and analysis of text used for instruction, and recovering details about the text and pedagogies that the sisters employed in their school. I've also traced the success of the school and methods to explain how such educational efforts may have influenced literary ambitions and freedoms of young women living in the first half of the 19th century. So along with the treatise, I also started a search for any surviving documents, so any kind of ledgers, records, or documents pertaining to the Miss Parker School. I contacted the Ashbourne Library and the Derbyshire Record Office. The Record Office mostly had personal letters and the record of purchase for the land. The library had no archival records for the school, but the assistant in charge, Beth Harding, graciously put me in contact with a local historian that had been doing research on the historical buildings, the street that Miss Parker School was on, and he also happened to live on that street. So I'll never get that lucky ever again with research, and he was really, really fantastic. Dr. Paul Thompson gave me a lot of really fantastic information. He educated me on some of the history of the school pertaining to name changes, changes in ownership, popularity of the school at the time, and he also provided a relevant section of literature from Adrian Hinstock's A Gregorian Country Town, Ashbourne, 1725 to 1825, which was fantastic support for my research. And all other information about the school was gathered from historical and preservation societies within that county. So let's talk about Erasmus and the girls. So this is Erasmus Darwin. He is significant in his own right, but he was the grandfather of the Charles Darwin. He was a physician, a natural philosopher, a slave trade abolitionist, inventor, poet. He was kind of a jack of all trades kind of guy. He got his education from Cambridge University and began his medical practice in 1756 in Lichfield. And there he also founded the Botanical Society. He's a very skilled doctor. He became a personal physician of King George III. But at the same time, he would offer very low price or free services for rural families or low-income families. He would eventually marry Polly Howard, with which he had 5 children, and following her death, he had 2 children with Mary Parker, which he did not marry. And those 2 children were Mary and Susanna. And even though they were illegitimate, they lived in the house with his legitimate children. They were raised on very equal terms. And even Charles Darwin didn't know that these were his daughters, even though they were running the school that he had bought, until after he had long died, and Charles Darwin's son, who was a genealogist, sent him a letter that was like, "Hey, Dad, did great-grandpa have like 2 other kids that no one knew about?" And Charles went, "I don't know." So We love a little family drama. And so Susanna and Mary both got the highest education. They were educated at separate seminaries. They worked for private families as educators until the opening of Miss Parker's School in 1794. The women were known to have a good reputation in the town and often walked the grounds at Ashbourne Park either with themselves or with students. Susanna retired in 1809 at 37 after she married Dr. Henry Hadley of Bredsall, and Mary would run the school on her own until her retirement in 1827 at 53. And I tell you their ages to kind of make up for them not having a portrait. I think it's significant to show how dedicated these women were to something they cared about, which was education and educating. So let's talk about the building. So it is still an existing building, and it's basically gone unchanged. You can actually stay there as an Airbnb now, if you so wish. It's been separated into apartments. It was changed slightly during the Victorian era, but overall has remained the same. In his treatise, Darwin describes it as having, quote, an ample schoolroom with ample dining room, 4 smaller parlors on the principal floor with 2 staircases, one of which is stone. The whole is airy and well lighted and now contains about 30 pupils without being crowded, unquote. And when he purchased this building, he not only purchased the building, he purchased the 1 acre of land it was on and a pew in the local church. Then it was about 700 pounds. Now it's about 75,000 pounds or $999,000 USD. So he's very committed to making sure not only the girls had this opportunity, but they were comfortable and had what they needed. Excellent. So it opened the following year in 1794 and remained open for 34 years until its eventual closing in 1828 and sold only after Mary Parker's death in 1859. It was originally called the Old Nag's Head Inn, then it changed to Miss Parker's School and is now called the Madge House. So let's talk about, oh yes, also it has a plaque still commemorating the girls. It does not say their names, unfortunately, but it does commemorate them being there and the school's founding. So Darwin's educational theories were based on and inspired very heavily by Locke, Jean-Louis, and Rousseau, and being inspired by Locke and Jean-Louis at the same time is very crazy, but he came up with some excellent things. So this treatise outlined his theories on education, exercise, diet, and discipline, with the assertion that all of those elements supported one another and student success in the boarding school. Darwin hypothesized that the mix of mental and physical exercise aids with, quote, agility of the body and cheerfulness of activity of the mind, unquote. A section of his treatise includes section 25 titled Exercise, Dumbbells. His treatise also includes a section about punishment, rewards, and motives most seen in schools, including bringing, quote, disgrace to the delinquent by using a fool's cap or meal or water gruel, unquote. He observed those methods were not often effective and led to a diminishing character and spirits, which he theorizes could harm the functions of the mind and possibly their health. In lieu of typical punishment conduct, he insisted that the authority of the teacher and hope for a reward would increase the students' willingness to perform their tasks with care and motivation. Rewards that he said encouraged continual educational focus and helped prevent envy included books, maps, colors, so like coloring utensils, or needle cases. Opposingly, money, wine, trinkets, and ornamental accessories should be avoided. Wine and mean comments aren't great at a party. Imagine if you're 10, right? Very, very much worse. Darwin also authored a section titled Diet, and when she talks about the additions to the children's board school meals, namely fresh milk and fresh fruits, or as close to fresh as possible in fruit pies. For dinner, he notes that meats and vegetables should be served with water or small beer, and that wine, brandy, and sugar should not be given to children, as they upset children's stomachs, and in the case of sugar, may be, quote, mixed with arsenic, unquote. Although these medical and health theories were atypically aimed towards the application of girls in boarding schools, these ideas would revolutionize educational standards and practices in boys' schools and girls' schools across the country in following decades. And so this is the contents page where you can see each individual section that he would talk about. So each of these sections talks about how they should be taught, what texts they should be using, and we'll go over a small list of texts that he included as well. But you can see the range. So I mean, there's sciences, there are very different types of history. These ones we're learning about the economy. Well, these girls were learning about the economy. And so you can see how differently this was to a typical in-home education. So these subjects had accompanying text in which the Parker sisters had a very heavy hand in recommending based on their educational experience. Darwin talks specifically about taking their advice. He says that, they're educational professionals basically, and it would only hinder what we're trying to do here if we didn't take their advice. And so let's look at these. So this is 2 of 8 pages of the catalog of books. And it was very hard to decide which ones to show. So we have on here poems, novels, and plays on the left, and then also arts and sciences, and then a small part of that morality section. And so this list shows a few things. It shows how varied the selection of books were. It also shows the emphasis on women writers and educators in this list. It also shows us the class of families that would send these girls to this boarding school, which would typically be middle and upper class families. And I did a general estimation on how much these books would cost families. The average would be about 3 shillings. In today's pounds, that's about 19 pounds, $25 USD. But most of them were about 1 shilling, which is about 6 pounds, $8 USD. So they were buying a lot of these books, but they would have been affordable. And the tuition for this per year was 25 pounds then, about 2,600 pounds now, and about $3,500 USD. So we have kind of a full scope based on this treatise of what they were really trying to do for girls, for women in the profession of education, and for the cost of families to actually attend. This is an example of a personal textbook from Mary Parker. It's got her name written on it. It's an English grammar book dated 1797. And so she would have been using this while she was working as an educator. And at the opening of the school, it was primarily her and Susanna providing the education. Wait, not thank you yet, I'm not done. And so as the school continued, it became more successful. Eventually they would hire more educators, male educators. Hinstock specifically talked about non-specific arithmetic and Italian educators, but there was also a French refugee who would come teach. He was a reverend and he taught French. They also had landscape painting, dancing. So they were trying not only to exercise the girls, but also have varied exercises for them to choose from. And the families were able to choose what the girls would be able to do, which is also pretty unique and pretty fun. So the range of curriculum, management of student conduct, and attention to student diet and health created a progressive mix of educational theories and circumstances. They represented a significant step forward for girls' education in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Darwin's progressive curriculum sought to provide young women a comprehensive education comparable to their male counterparts, emphasizing the importance of mental and physical development. With balanced diet and positive disciplinary methods highlighted the belief that well-educated women meaningfully contribute to society, the home, and themselves. The inclusion of innovative texts and authors as Ms. Parker's school illustrated a vision for female education and involvement outside of the domestic sphere. This school served as an important example of the efforts to challenge traditional gender roles and promote intellectual equality for women during a time when the concept was far from mainstream. The legacy of this educational experiment helped pave a path for reform in women's education, women's authority in academia, and the gradual reshaping of societal attitudes toward the capabilities and freedoms of women in public life. Thank you.